Shutout presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hogstye Network presents It's Just Business, where we look at the dollars and cents, the media, the overall goings-on in the business world of the sports that we love and sometimes only marginally like. This time it'll be a bit of a focus on the NBA. We'll celebrate the kickoff of the NBA's hot stove season with NBA draft, trades, etc. Will give us an entree into a couple NBA and basketball-related stories. So let's jump right into it. Let me welcome our regular contributor, Steve, and our guest contributor, Alex, as Rich has the week off. Welcome, fellas.
Hey, guys.
Glad to have you here, Alex.
Yeah. I'm happy to be
here.
Happy to sub in.
I'm just glad I haven't gotten fired from my job on It's Just Business yet. So things are going well so far.
Yes, in fact, we gave you a merit increased pay.
You know what? You can multiply by pay by 100 and it will still be peanuts.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a labor of love, people. It's a labor of love.
It really is. It's a labor of love. And to answer your question, how can I get fired from my own show? Alex, I don't know. I guess gross incompetence, perhaps. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm headed down that road.
Hey, I've done gross incompetence on our other show for 2 years now and not been fired, so.
We won't worry until the Ball family sues us.
Because that may happen,
when we'll know we've messed up.
Because, our weekly As the Ball Family Turns thing, at some point it's going to come back to haunt us.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I will say this: I listen to all your shows. Every time you start talking about the Ball family, I kind of hit the fast forward button a little bit.
Oh, come on, that's our regular feature.
LeVar Ball so entertains me. The guy has grown on me, to be quite honest.
Well, of course he has, because his son just went to your team.
Yeah, but beyond that, it's like, let's just do our ad. You want to just do As the Ball Turns now, Chris, since I brought it up?
Yeah, sure. It's not a big one this week.
Yeah, no, it's not a big one. See, the thing about LeVar Ball is he's in on his own joke. I realized this week. He's in on the joke, and the joke is he's bombastic to get attention, But anyway, so he's kind of grown on me a little bit. But Lonzo Ball obviously got drafted second overall to the Lakers, and so the grand marketing plan for the Big Baller brand is about to come to fruition, and everything we talked about the shoe deal will probably work out for them now that he's got a team like the Lakers, which probably has the biggest fan base, certainly outside of the Knicks, in the NBA, and so he's going to sell
definitely the biggest fan base in the West.
Yeah, for sure,
without a question.
And so he's going to sell a ton of shoes, and so from a financial standpoint, it will probably work out for him. So you got to, as bombastic and as obnoxious as the guy is, you have to applaud his vision and his central entrepreneurial business strategy. I like it.
I think it's funny that it's a slow week in As the Ball Family Turns when the son gets drafted by the premier team in the entire NBA. That's a down week. But I think going forward, the fact that we have got Tinseltown and the Balls now explicitly linked means that this will be providing content on the reg.
At least for the next 10 years, or maybe less if his son flames out somehow. But I'll be honest, as a basketball player, I don't see it happening. I think his son is at least going to be a decent to, quality starter. You never know who's going to be an elite NBA talent in the end. But I just find it very funny. I think if Saddam Hussein's sons had become Lakers players, then Steve might have turned his opinion around on Saddam.
Saddam might not have been that bad a guy.
Steve is such a Lakers homer.
Look at the shirt I'm even wearing right now, as a matter of fact. No,
I know you are. I'm just going to give you a little bit of crap for it. Not
the business.
Sodom was in on the joke.
But I'm serious about that, and I figured that out before the draft. By the way, it's all a marketing strategy. But to finish this thought real fast, from a business standpoint, we talked about this a few weeks ago. he's got a huge profit margin on the shoes. So because there's no middleman, he's getting them manufactured directly from his company. The marketing costs are practically zero. I mean, all he's doing is running a website and talking, and that's the entire marketing campaign, basically.
I mean, that's us, and we know what that costs us.
Right, yeah. I mean, but we're not selling $500 shoes. But
no, we're selling $20 T-shirts.
But from his perspective, it markets itself. He's probably going to make a lot of money, at least in the short term. So that's the effect of Lonzo Ball getting drafted by the Lakers from a business standpoint.
Right.
All right, so we'll transition away from ball to basketball. We'll kick it off here with, is the NBA going NASCAR? In that, I think 8 teams in the next season, the 2017-2018 NBA season, will have corporate logos as advertisements on their jerseys. So rev up your engines. Corporate sponsorship on players' bodies. What do we think?
Why does this bother anybody?
I think there's a lot of sports purists who hate it. It's the baseball mentality. Anytime you change something about a sport, there's going to be a segment of old-timers who just have a problem with it.
I guess.
And, it takes away from... And we know it's an illusion, but there's an illusion that sports are not about money. And I know. You and I, and we all know that that's not the case. But it's those people who still think it's all about
the
playing
purity
of the
of the competition. Kind of that's what it is.
Right. You know what I mean. So I think that's why there's people who are upset by it.
Because 30 billionaires get involved in things for the purity of the competition.
Right, exactly. I will say I went through some of the people who are doing the advertising. First off, some of it looks terrible, but some of it, like the GE logo on the Celtics uniform, not bad. Like, it's not intrusive right now. We're not at the point where it looks like soccer in Europe.
And I got to point out before you continue, Alex, is that for people who don't listen to the Hogstad but do listen to this show, Alex is a uniform nerd of the highest order, knows everything about it. So he's the perfect guy to talk about this. But go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
Everybody knows about that. Chris knows about that. It's like one of my worst kept little secrets.
It's your thing.
And just to take the opposite side, there is literally almost nothing in the sports universe that I could care less about than fetishism over uniforms.
Well, look, from an advertisement's perspective, this was inevitable. It was always going to happen. It's going to only get worse.
It's going to happen in every sport at some point.
Every square inch of the planet is advertised somehow, some way, right? I don't know why people get offended when they put a little tiny GE logo on a Celtics jersey. I mean, I'm offended by Celtics jerseys generally speaking, but that's a whole nother matter. I think it's smart. I'm no fan of Euro soccer, but those of you who are know that every inch of those jerseys is covered with ads, and the public doesn't seem to care. I mean, I get it. If it's too intrusive, it sort of messes up the purity of the uniform.
Sure.
I wouldn't want Wendy's right in the middle of the Lakers emblem, for example, or the Redskins emblem.
Right. If you started taking away the logos of the teams or the names of the teams and putting it in, I think you would see a lot more outrage.
Isn't there a soccer team called the Red Bulls?
Yeah. And their logo is the Red Bull logo.
But see, the people shouldn't complain. It's because this is done to increase the profits of the league. Now, I can say from the football perspective, and I'm probably sure this is true from the NBA perspective. From a football perspective, this sort of income will translate down to the players because it's included in the CBA's definition of revenue. And I'm sure it's probably the same for the NBA. And so ultimately, this will result in more money for the league, which will allow them to put on a better product and will be more money for the players. And so there's really no downside except for those of you who get their panties in a wad over having to look at a GE logo, which I think it's minimal effect. Minimal, if nothing.
No. And here's, like you said, in soccer, they have logos everywhere. I think that starts to look pretty, gross, just aesthetically speaking. If you've got like 6 logos on your chest, that it starts to look ridiculous.
Well, what about NASCAR? It's kind of the same.
Well, It is.
It's all ugly. That's not we're not debating aesthetics, right? It's all ugly.
Yeah. I think we would all agree there.
Well,
it's
yeah,
ugly.
and it's like, are you going to stop watching your favorite local NBA team because they have, an ad or two on the jerseys? I don't think so.
No, but I probably would be less likely to buy that NBA team's uniform off their website or whatever.
That may be true.
I
mean, maybe that's the...
Although
Go ahead.
Are they even allowed to carry the logos in their retail versions of the jerseys?
Oh, I'm sure they are.
I don't know if they've said anything.
Yeah,
about that yet.
You'd be a fool not to, right? What is the downside to GE for allowing the GE logo to be put on a retail Celtics jersey? I mean, seriously.
It's an interesting...
I don't think there is a downside.
We'll see, except for you could say the downside is that if they have a chilling effect on the retail sales, to Alex's point.
Well, here's what you probably would do, and this is just me putting my marketing hat on. You would sell both types of jerseys, one with the GE logo for $79.99, and then one without the logo for $99.99, and then you're making extra money off the people who don't want advertising.
Maybe this is what we need.
Right, it's like the freemium model.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's where we need to keep an eye out on this for the future, is what happens with the jerseys. With the jersey sales.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And I think...
Oh, go ahead.
That's it.
The weird angle for me is knowing the NBA, knowing sports culture, and knowing the business of sports, how long before the NBA has to actually legislate whether players can tattoo logos on to their bodies, and then who collects that revenue?
I mean, I don't think the Players Association would ever agree to tattoo limitations. You'd have the Players Association have to agree to it. And quite honestly, now you're talking about a personal freedom, and I'm not sure that is ever going to be able to be legislated from a legal perspective and from a contractual perspective.
I will say there are plenty of companies out there that have all sorts of rules about tattoos. I know when I got the job I work now, one of the first things that was informally asked, let's say that because I know you can get in trouble asking this in a job interview, is do you have any face tattoos?
Face tattoos?
Yeah, when you work in a corporate culture, they don't want that.
Yeah, but the NBA is a unique...
So is that when you had to get your teardrop removed?
Yeah, well, and all sorts of stuff I had tattooed on my forehead.
Well, I had the Mike...
I kind of looked like Jared Leto's Joker.
I had the Mike Tyson thing tattooed on my face before I got my current job, and they made me get rid of it.
I do think it'll be interesting, though, to see if a player pushes that. Do I go out and negotiate my own contract with Corporation X and put it right on my bicep?
Well,
I
mean, first of all, I can't believe somebody has done that already. But second of all, I'm not sure that major brands would want that. Does Coca-Cola or whatever want to have an advertisement in the form of a tattoo on J.R. Smith's neck? I'm not sure that's the image they want to portray in their advertising.
I think it would depend on the company we're talking about. Who wouldn't have a problem with it? Tattoo parlors. If a tattoo parlor was like, we'll give you $5,000 to have a tattoo of our parlor name on you.
Why would
something like
LeBron James mess with a tattoo of a tattoo parlor?
Oh, not LeBron,
Any
but
of those guys.
Some sixth
you
man.
Think so? Maybe.
Yeah.
I think the NBA is not the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball are not traditional corporate cultures. They are corporations, and so from that respect, it is a corporate culture. But it's sports, and it's first and foremost. And so it's. I don't think we can equate what in your case, your government contractor. The rules they have are with the NBA.
I realize that, but I'm just saying it's not like it's never been done.
And furthermore, the NBA has never regulated tattoos at all, so it appears, because every player out there has got a sleeve tattoo, it seems, and whatever, to each their own. I just can't see how the NBA Players Association would ever agree to any limitations like that, personally.
Well,
yeah, I'm not saying what the rules and regs would be, but I predict that, especially as it goes from 8 teams to 16 teams to full league, there will be a player that pushes this issue.
And my one thing I would also look at is, we remember seeing this, we're all Redskins fans, with Robert Griffin, how he had to deal with Adidas, and he kept on getting in trouble because he would cover up the Nike logos when he'd be practicing.
Well, that's different.
Which, by the way, if we're talking about advertising on uniforms, it has been going on for a long time. Logos have been on uniform. Corporate logos from the uniform makers have been there forever.
Well, yeah, and the Adidas thing, isn't the first time that happened. That if you go back to the '92 Dream Team in the Olympics,
Right.
Everybody who was not Nike covered up the Nike. Like Magic Johnson was Adidas, and so he covered up the Nike logo. That's been going on for a long time.
So let's just say hypothetically, like I'm looking at the names of some of the corporate sponsors: StubHub, Blue Diamond Almonds, GE. I've never heard of this one. Infor. I don't even know who that is with Brooklyn.
That I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, but okay. So let's say that the Cavs have Goodyear as a sponsor. What if, just hypothetically, Michelin offered LeBron James $5 million to be in their TV ads? And then he starts having an issue with the Goodyear sponsor being on his uniform. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that's something you can work out contractually, okay? When LeBron
Sure.
James negotiates his deal with Michelin, you put a provision in that says LeBron James is not responsible for any corporate sponsors that either the NBA or the Cleveland Cavaliers may sign up, and to the extent that LeBron is required to wear a Goodyear logo on a uniform provided by the Cavs and the NBA in conjunction with his NBA service, then it's not a default of the contract. I think you can negotiate around that.
Sure, but I guarantee you eventually we will see with these ads on uniforms some kind of conflict, and someone does the RG3 move where they try and tape it up and get in trouble. It's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about this, though. I mean, Nike where it makes NBA or NFL uniforms. I think they make
Right.
NBA uniforms, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know who makes
Somebody.
NBAs
Well,
now.
it almost doesn't matter because some of these players have Under Armour or Under Armour sponsors. Some are Adidas, some are Nike. Well, that's in conflict with whoever makes the uniform already. And so what I'm saying about the conflict between the how you ride around it contractually in the contracts is already happening. This is not something that I dreamed up and have solved a problem. They've already thought about this.
It'll be
Okay.
interesting to watch as the continued NASCARization of the NBA, and then see where it goes out from there. Because all of these big leagues are copycats. So if it catches on, we'll see them everywhere. I think baseball probably would be the last holdout,
Yeah,
but
probably so.
they'll fall too.
Yeah, they will.
One last thing. It's not quite on the same topic, but I do remember yesterday, I forgot to mention this to you guys, the NHL switched uniform manufacturers, which, it is a very businessy, uniformy thing, but minor change. They went from, I believe, Reebok to Adidas.
They probably got a better deal from from Adidas.
Yeah. No.
Can't blame them.
Yep. But Reebok keeps on losing its strength when it comes to uniforms.
Yeah, well, they do. They don't have nearly as many player sponsorships either as some of the other manufacturers.
Yeah. They've gone to being a fourth tier. I remember when I was a kid, Reebok was easily number 2 to Nike in terms of name brand for
Well,
shoes.
I mean, the way to solve the problem is for them to, pay a truckload of money to the latest star, to Markel Fultz or somebody. He's already signed up with somebody else, but that's the way to get back into prominence. That's why they do it in the first place.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll be checking back on this topic, I would imagine, especially as we see challenges to it or we track sales. Lots of continuing fallout from this story, probably.
Sure.
Let's stay with the round ball a little bit and talk about the historical black colleges' attempt to start to monetize their game with their amateur athletes. This is a topic I imagine we will revisit many times over. Some of the business models around college athletics, the equity around players and their compensation for what is I think I saw in the article, at least a $10 billion industry. So we'll probably touch on this many times, but here's a great story to look at this issue on, where we see
now let's
college athletics start to be a disruptor in this within the system.
Now, let's be clear about what it is, though. It's not the historically black colleges themselves that are doing this. This is an economist out of New York City. I think he's out of New York. No, he's San Francisco. He's out of San Francisco, who has dreamed up an idea to go around the NCAA and organize a pay-for-play league using the historically black colleges, okay? It's not the colleges themselves that have signed up for it. This is an idea proposed by a guy.
Yeah, it's a business proposition at this point. I don't think he's made any contracts.
I
yet.
mean, the big picture here is I think everybody can agree, even if you are even minimally interested in college athletics, that the NCAA is a terror and a nightmare in many respects, and they're poorly run from an economic standpoint. I think it's safe to
corrupt as all hell. I think
it's corrupt. I think they're using these players. Like we're going to talk about Terrell Pryor today on the Hogsty, and when we do Hogsty Alex, and he got caught up in he got in trouble for trading jerseys for tattoos, which is just absurd. That the NCAA cares about that. And so this is a way to get around this and fairly compensate players while just getting rid of the NCAA. Because, the newsflash here is these colleges don't have to participate in the NCAA. There's not some sort of federal law that says, or the Department of Education rule that says if you want to play college athletics, you have to be in NCAA. This is something everybody's agreed to. It's an association that the colleges agree to. And if it doesn't work from a financial standpoint, or if it works better through some other way, you may see somebody do it. And frankly, I mean, the historically black colleges are, they do a great service. They're there for a reason. Right. It's I get it as to why they exist, but the simple fact of the matter is from a sports perspective, they're not getting the 5-star recruits.
Not anymore. I mean, they were back in the 60s, and that the big article that came out about this was in Vice. And they talked about that history a little bit, how back in the day, pre-segregation, the historically black colleges did get those 5-star recruits, and how even after segregation, for a long time, they were still powerhouses. It's just kind of gone away over the decades.
So the idea here is, maybe Markelle Fultz, the next Markelle Fultz, who just got drafted number 1 overall this week to the 76ers, if there's a pay-for-play option that he can go play in a historically black university, say he can go play for Howard University and get paid some amount, well, the NBA isn't going to not draft him. The NBA couldn't care less. The NBA would, if you're the captain of the Syrian basketball team, they're going to draft you, if you can play. They don't care. And so I don't think the NBA would have a problem with it, or the NFL or anything. And so the idea here is if they pay him some money, then they're going to attract more people to these universities.
Right. And I think it's an interesting idea. It's something I've kind of seen more and more fans say should happen. And, just your Joe Average saying, I'd rather see it done this way. And what we're talking about in terms of salary, this guy's saying $75,000 to $100,000 a year, working with the schools to get the kid into school at the same time. My only kind of hesitancy on his idea is some of those historically black colleges are in very small towns. Like Grambling, I think, is in a town of 4,000 people. There's no way you can have a sports franchise with those numbers. You're talking probably a $2 million budget just for salary.
Well, that's the whole problem with the NCAA, with getting the NCAA to pay players. From that perspective, number one, there's a federal law problem because Title IX, of the U.S. Code, in essence, says universities have to spend as much money and give equal time to female athletes as male athletes. And so if you take, Jameis Winston. Well, let's stick with Markelle Fultz. Markelle Fultz, he's not a good example. Let's stick with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, was at Florida State. He was the biggest name in college football purely from a marketing standpoint. He was worth a lot of money back then. Well, if you pay Jameis,
you're talking about a guy who easily could have been a $5 million a year college player.
Now, so if you pay Jameis Winston some absurd amount of money, well, you've got to make up for that and pay the people on the women's volleyball team a lot of money too, and that just utterly doesn't work financially at all. And so that's the problem with the pay-for-play thing in the NCAA is federal law kind of puts the kibosh on it. And so
and people keep on talking about doing it within the NCAA. I'm with you. I think you got to just cut bait with the NCAA if you're going to go this route. Kind of like baseball has its own minor league system where they pay their own players after high school. No one's got an issue with it. If other sports leagues want to go that direction, that's what they need to do.
Yeah, because, I mean, the Title IX doesn't really apply to the NCAA. Title IX applies to universities as a whole, and we probably I need to do some more research on it because I honestly haven't looked at it in a while.
Well, no, you're pretty close
Yeah.
there, and you know I work for the Department of Education. I actually hear quite a lot about Title IX.
Okay,
in my
well then I
job.
think I'm right in saying that
yeah.
it's not written specifically that says the NCAA has to do something. It's universities have to do
No,
this.
it's about everything.
Yeah, and so
it's the same thing as like disability access and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
and so I think
It's
that
the same
part of the
concept.
problem with this setup that this gentleman from San Francisco is set up is he may run into that. If you pay the Howard University basketball team a ton of money, what about the Howard University volleyball team or the softball team, which makes zero money?
Right.
They're a loss leader for these universities.
I mean,
The only way to do it is to separate out football and basketball from the normal
Right.
part of college athletics and make it some kind of public-private partnership type of arrangement that cordons that off and is it a revenue generator for the university and then but also makes it a for-profit business that within the university's business structure is the only way to do it to set up the system outside of Title IX
Right,
and
but
federal
You
law.
have to
If
get
you do that-
Congress to help you with an amendment to Title IX to even get that done.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I honestly think that the only way this ends up happening is if you have to just say we're not involved with the colleges at all at this point. Maybe as part of your high school level or post high school league, you offer reimbursement for whatever wherever these kids go to school. Like my job, I can go to grad school and they'll partially reimburse me. You could easily do that as part of this high school or this league.
Well, how about this? You mentioned earlier Major League Baseball, Alex. The rule on Major League Baseball is that you can be drafted in Major League Baseball straight out of high school, and you can sign a contract and
Right.
play in the Major League Baseball
You can be
structure.
drafted at like 16, right?
Well,
it's
They never do that. I mean, they're drafting the seniors, okay? They're drafting high school seniors. And so then, a handful like Alex Rodriguez was drafted out of high school and went straight to the NBA,
Right.
Major League Baseball. 99.9% of them play in the minor leagues for some period of time. And fine, if you want to do that, great. But if you choose to go to college, you cannot be drafted again until your junior year of college. That is the rule. And, so what is stopping the NBA? The NBA already has a developmental league. And we're going to talk
Right.
about that here in a minute. But the developmental league is not something they promote very well. It's not something they use very well. It's sort of like the failed out NBA players and the guys who couldn't make it go there. Well, what happens?
a lot of late second round draft picks.
Yeah, end up in the D League, right? So why doesn't the NBA turn the D League into more of a minor league structure and bring in, draft the kids out of high school and say, okay, you're not ready for the NBA, but you go play for the Chicago Bulls minor league in the Chicago Bulls minor league structure for a year or two, and then they'll bring you up. And that way you wouldn't need the guy out of San Francisco to start paying the Howard University basketball team because the NBA would take care of it for
I think
you.
this may sound totally crazy, but I think it'll actually be easier to find a way to monetize Division I basketball and football with federal government involved, all of that what that entails, than it will be to launch a legitimate minor league development league systems to the level of they'll need as a talent pipeline in the NBA and the NFL at this
Why
point.
do you think
I
that?
think the culture of college athletics, the nature of those sports, the cost it will be to actually have to launch the level of a minor league systems that will actually produce talent pipeline. I think the route to some form of equity here is probably tweaks to the existing system, significant, but then it is, creating an entire different ecosystem of talent.
Well, I think you're right when it comes to the NFL because the NFL, they had a minor league for a long time in NFL Europe,
Right.
and then they folded it finally. Which, by the way, 10 years ago, as of this week, was the last time they ever even tried it. But
Yeah, but quick,
The
name
NBA
the
has
NBA
a
star
league.
that came through the developmental league, or even decent.
Well, that's what my
contributor.
point is, though, Chris, is that they're not using it properly now. The idea would be,
Right.
If, say, Markelle Fultz, wanted to get paid immediately out of high school and skip the fraud that is the one and dones in college, he just goes and plays for the Celtics minor league team for a year.
It'll never happen.
I mean, I think the
The,
NBA
look at the
been
one and done
slowly
model
building
is
their
very
D-League.
successful
That's the problem.
for all involved, right? Like that, we might call it a sham, and I would
Not
agree. But
successful
it's
for the
actually
universities.
Yeah, and successful for those players.
No, I would argue that it's not necessarily that successful for the universities, and that the point of university ultimately is to educate people, and that's a complete and utter fraud.
Yes, that's the given, but in the business model, it's not. It works for everyone. Kentucky and Louisville stay at the top of the chain. They know how to
except for the players, of course.
Well, except for the players, it gives them a year of visibility and shoots them up to the top of the draft, and so it does provide a year of developmental league for those players, and it gets them only 1 year of free play.
I mean, wouldn't it be better though for society in general if you make these kids stay in college longer? If as a society we encourage education by making them stay in school for 3 years, well, isn't that better ultimately? And the NBA is gonna.
Well, that's not the debate, though.
It should be the debate.
I feel like that is part of the debate. I think that's a big issue. I would take it even further. Why are we wasting scholarship money on guys who are just there to play sports and it's a fraud anyway? We all know those stories of guys who they don't really go to class, they don't really participate in that aspect of the college.
All they have
system,
to do is stay eligible through December.
Right, and then they make fake classes so that they can still get those, C's and B's that they need from time to time.
Well, this isn't a systemic fix, but I think what is an interesting tweak that actually has implications for football and basketball, but actually I think it have implications throughout college athletics, is actually deferred admission. So we should just call it what it is, even for your women's softball leagues. I think this, where you don't have to, you can actually space out where your ability to take college. Maybe you get 2 years of just focusing on your athletics, but you get eligibility in return.
You got to understand how scholarships work for all sports. All scholarships, most football scholarships are year to year, okay? And that's the same with basketball. But they're awarded up front a 4-year scholarship with the understanding it needs to be renewed. But in the case of small sports like softball and baseball, they're not getting full scholarships. They're getting a partial scholarship. Okay, they're getting some money from the university because the scholarship money for the softball team and the LSU baseball team is minuscule compared to the scholarship money for the football and basketball team. So a lot of these kids who are playing intercollegiate athletics are paying some tuition and some of their costs in addition to receiving some scholarship money for the right to play for their university. So it's not the same in that it's not a free ride and they can't just sign up. They're there truly there to get an education. In the case of those.
Yeah, I get all that. I understand all that. That doesn't mean, but if you're going to actually look to build equity into the system, most of what is tradition or regular is going to have to get thrown out. And you could imagine giving deferred class responsibilities for a year or 2 years to focus on a sport as part of the package that gets offered, even at a partial scholarship level.
That may work for the De'Aaron Foxes of the world, but that's not going to work for the softball and volleyball team. Because that's...
We'll see. I don't know if I agree.
Okay.
I think you'd have to play around with lots... I mean, there's lots of things you could do around academic calendar. Because, even in women's athletics, there's just too many conflicts with class scheduling and the athletic calendar. And they actually don't look at how to actually make those things more equitable and have more options for how you can actually balance a student-athlete life, even in the mid-tier athletics.
I think you're right about that part, but I don't know. I just think it all needs to be separated completely at this point. I don't see any way of resolving the issue until we just say, all right, NBA, make your D-League work because you've got it going at this point. I don't know what the NFL is going to do. The NFL's kind of a hodgepodge mess when it comes to developmental stuff. They've never really
having a minor league recently. In the past year or two.
Yeah.
Look, I mean...
I know, yeah.
It works in baseball, in that everybody's happy the way the baseball draft and the baseball...
works in the NHL.
And it works, is the NHL's the same.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it couldn't work in the NBA if... and in the NFL, for that matter, if they just kind of tweaked this a little bit, but particularly the NBA. because of the one and done thing. The NFL doesn't allow the one and done thing, and ostensibly it's because an 18-year-old is going to get demolished in the NFL, whereas in the NBA it's not necessarily true. But also a part of it, I think, is the NFL, being the conservative institution it is, does want to encourage education. So they do want to be seen as an institution that's encouraging people to stay in school. That's why the NFL has the rule that says you can't join, if you're a senior, you can't join your team's mini camps until after graduation. And that's the specific reason for that rule, is because the NFL wants to encourage people to graduate, and the NBA couldn't care less about that. So there you go.
Where have you gone, Maurice Claret? So let's move on.
Maurice Claret.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think at least he may be out now, but he definitely spent some time in the clink.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so we're gonna switch off of Roundball explicitly and do a bit of a check-in on some trademark issues that got some conclusion this week, which have implications for the Redskins name and some of the trademark legalese. It's not a open and shut, but it is an interesting milestone in the story. Steve, you want to give us an update?
Yeah, sure. We've talked on the Hogsty about the case involving a band called the Slants. In very brief form, there's a group of Asian American men who formed a band that they named the Slants, and the lead singer said that he did that. The Slants is a racial slur for Asian people that has been used.
Sure.
And the stated reason that the lead singer said that they named the band the Slants is to reclaim that slur for Asian Americans. Fine. Well, they tried to trademark it. The trademark office turned them down, said, it's offensive. And they cited the Lanham Act, which is the same thing they punted the Redskins on. And so the simple version of the long story is that the lead singer sued, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court this week voted on an 8-0 vote that the Lanham Act, the portion of the Lanham Act that allows the federal Patent and Trademark Office to decline or reject or revoke trademarks on the basis of a judgment that they are disparaging is unconstitutional under the First Amendment. So the Slants, they're going to get their trademark, and that affects the Redskins because that case is going to be established U.S. Supreme Court precedent for the Redskins trademark case, which is sitting currently doing nothing in a federal appellate court right now. And so that precedent is almost assuredly going to allow the Redskins to ultimately keep their trademark. And so that ultimately means that the Redskins will continue to be able to sell jerseys without fear of people stealing their marks. So that's a good thing if you care about Dan Snyder's pocketbook and the pocketbook of the other 32 owners. What does everybody else think?
I think that, obviously this is probably going to end the legal side of the case for the whole Redskins name debate.
Yeah.
It won't end the debate itself, I'm sure. We can get into that. Just because you won in the court of law doesn't mean you're going to win the court of public opinion.
Right.
So,
I think we can talk about that more later, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but that's kind of my initial reaction to this. I don't think it's going to change anything. Mike Wise is still going to write an angry story about this at some point if he hasn't already. I don't know. I don't pay attention to him anymore. So,
well, let me just say, I breathe a deep sigh of relief that all's right with Daniel Snyder's ability to fill his purse. So, wow,
God.
I can get back to sleeping at night.
Yeah, thank God. No, but it's important, I think, depending on what side of the political line you fall on, but from my perspective, it's a victory for free speech, and it's important to note that it was an 8-0 vote, okay? What I've said on previous episodes of the Hogsty is that when we talked about this, is my concern it was going to be split on party lines, because without getting, too political here, typically politically conservative judges tend to side on the side of free speech, and conservative and liberal judges sometimes tend to side on the side, while they are for free speech in some aspects, they also want to protect. They also have an interest in protecting against discrimination, minorities against discrimination. Thank you. And so in this case, an 8-0 vote means Justice Thomas and Justice Ginsburg are on the same side of it. They all believed 8-8, and certainly Neil Gorsuch is going to have the same opinion. So it's basically a unanimous court that this was a clear First Amendment violation. So I think the Redskins case is dead. It'll take a few months to work its way through the appellate court, but I think the case is dead.
Yeah,
I have often. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I was going to say, Steve and I are probably as different politically as it gets, but I'm with you on that. I'm always going to fall on the side of, the First Amendment's, to me, it's pretty important. I majored in, media and stuff like that. You kind of get a thing for valuing the First Amendment, regardless of, political leanings. So,
well, because think about it like this. The original purpose of the First Amendment, I think, if you could resurrect Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and all these guys, they would probably say that the original purpose of the First Amendment was to protect the public's right to criticize the government. It's not necessarily your right to disparage Asian Americans.
Well, as far as the free speech part,
yeah, but
if you talk to some of them, it's more about the religion, the freedom of religion.
Well, that's part
thing.
of it. Yeah, but my point here is that if the government can regulate the right of Daniel Snyder to call his team the Redskins, what's to say that they won't try to regulate Daniel Snyder's right to invoke a name that criticizes the government? And that is the very heart of the protection established by the Constitution, and that was the fear, I think, fundamentally with the
there are
Lanham
things
Act.
going on right now that, and we don't want to get political. There's things that the FCC is doing right now where they're trying to squash down on people who are criticizing the president, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's why we have courts. That's why we have courts.
And that's why we have the First Amendment is, that stuff is going to go to court, and the FCC is going to get their ass handed to them
Probably so.
by some judge,
To me, the only business leverage that could, and I would say predict, might be the thing that leverages it towards a name change, which I've been saying for a while, is, first, Schneider needs a new stadium, and then with the new stadium, he's going to want to host a Super Bowl. And if the court of public opinion and the heat is at a point where it's so high that the NFL puts a stipulation on a name change to Snyder hosting a Super Bowl in his new stadium, to me, that's the only route of a kind of business leverage thing that would get him to consider a name change. I think everything else is just window dressing, and he's not going to have a change of heart.
Well,
so I think the NFL uses this leverage about whether Snyder gets a Super Bowl or not.
Well, if anybody out there read my magnum opus on the stadium from last month, which is on www.hogsty.com right now, please read it, because I put a lot of time and effort into that. I think it's safe to say that the state of Virginia couldn't care less about the name. The District of Columbia government very much cares about it and has stated, Mayor Bowser has stated her opposition to the name. Some of the city councilmen have stated their opposition to the name. The state of Maryland hasn't explicitly said, but the governor has already made a pitch for the stadium to Daniel Snyder. So I think it's safe to say that, at least from the executive branch of the Maryland government, it's not an issue. So, and in Virginia, it's not going to be an issue.
Right, but that governor is going to be probably gone in the next election because, Republican governors don't last more than a term in Maryland.
Yeah, so you never know what may happen.
Virginia's about to change governors, so who knows what's going to happen with that.
Don't be surprised, though, that if the stadium, I think the governor of Virginia very, very much, from what I understand, wants to get the stadium deal closed before he leaves the office.
Right.
And so I think that's fairly likely that's going to happen. So don't be surprised if the deal is signed up and this name thing is not an issue at all in Virginia.
Yeah, I'm not talking about my scenario is after the stadium is built and all of that stuff is completed, and what the NFL wants to do about whether Snyder hosts a Super Bowl in that shiny new stadium or not.
I think the NFL right now is too conservative to be all that concerned about the name. Roger Goodell has come out and stated in the past that it's a team issue and it's a Daniel Snyder issue, not an NFL issue. And none of the major sports have made an issue of it. The Major League Baseball has sort of under the table tried to get the Cleveland Indians to get rid of Chief Wahoo, which it really is a racist logo.
Right, and by the way, they have been slowly phasing it out.
Yeah. But from an NFL perspective, I think it would take a seismic shift in the leadership of the NFL for them to get too worked up over the name Redskins. Personally,
Right.
We'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
we're ways away from a stadium being agreed on built, so that's a lot of time in today's culture. And we could do an over/under on whether we think Goodell's there in 5 years, which is a minimum time between this would even be an issue.
oh, I'd take the over on
That's
that
true.
one. I'd definitely take the over.
And I'm not saying it's happened. I'm saying that is probably one of the last points of negotiation from a business standpoint that you could see rearing its head.
Right.
Okay.
At least for a while.
Yeah.
There are always crazy things that could change.
Yeah. All right. Enough of that. Enough of name.
All right, so we usually like to end this show thinking about a story that we're kind of tracking, something that's interesting to us that we might be future fodder for this particular show. It's Just Business on the Hogstide Network. We don't always get to them, but it's kind of good to tickle our fancy to see what we're paying attention to in this space. Anyone want to jump in with one they kind of think is interesting for future episodes that you find personally interesting in the world of sports and business?
Well, it's the same thing I said last week. I find the business of Super Bowls to be incredibly interesting, and the NFL is going to announce the next couple Super Bowls here, I believe, in conjunction with the start of the season. I think.
Are they announcing more than one location? Is that
Well,
right?
yeah. I mean, the rumor is that yes, the rumor is, so yeah. Sometimes they do that. Yes. So, and the Olympics has also been talking about that too, by the way. But I'm fascinated by the business of the Super Bowls because it's really all about money for these cities. And whenever it is that I may be wrong in that, but in terms of when the NFL is going to announce it, but whenever the NFL announces that, we're going to do a segment we're going to educate the listening public on what Super Bowls are really about for these cities and these states. That interests me a lot.
Need a cash register noise on a special effects
We're going to
board
play
for
that.
Steve here.
Yeah, well, we're going to play that. We're going to get the rights of the Pink Floyd song "Money" perhaps and play it.
Yeah.
Except you and I'd have to pay
Well,
for
10-second
it. Alex,
rule.
so.
Remember, Steve,
That's true.
There's a 10
We better
second
tie up that Stamps.com advertisement then soon.
In terms of things I'm looking at in terms of business of sports, and I'm not a regular, so I'm looking at something that's a local story here in D.C. That is that the Wizards are building their practice facility fairly close to where I live, actually, in the Anacostia area of Washington. And this practice facility is also going to be a small stadium of about 5,000 seat stadium, where they're going to. We were just talking about the NBA D League. That's where they're going to put a D League team. So, just over the river from where the Wizards actually play in downtown
Do you
D.C.
think there's a market for that in D.C., given the fact that the Wizards are in the same city?
Oh, I think D.C. is a basketball city at some level. And this is also going to be used for the WNBA team. And it's going to be a concert hall. They're basically building a mini stadium over here. It's all about adding more gentrification.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting. Definitely something we can talk about.
I like the mini venue idea. I think that's an interesting idea. The one I'm tracking actually is revisiting a topic that we've discussed a few times on the show, and that is professional sports in Las Vegas. The NHL just had its expansion draft with the Las Vegas.
they're building a pretty
Gladiators, I
good
think.
team with that expansion draft.
Yeah. So we're gonna have the NHL and a team in the NHL in Las Vegas before we'll have the Raiders. So it's actually an interesting thing to track some of the issues we've talked about in the past about the NFL in Las Vegas. So we've kind of got a little bit of a petri dish to watch before the NFL arrives and kind of look at and see what goes on there. So I think that's fascinating. We got a little quicker look than maybe we even expected about what are the ramifications of pro sports in Sin City.
Yeah, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Just wait for the Super Bowl and Super Bowl to be put there.
It's going to be a nightmare.
Yep.
All right, so
possibly
that
go
brings
wrong.
us to close. Thank you, Alex, for doing double duty in the
Yeah,
Hogstide
happy to.
Network family. Enjoyed having you. It keeps us on schedule. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with more topics. You can always find us at The Hogstye on Twitter if you want to feedback or give us show topics or tell us how bad we suck, whatever. You can also find me at ChrisLarry33. Same rules apply, although we prefer compliments. Alex, any way people can find you?
Alex35332 on Twitter.
All right. So we'll be back in a couple weeks. Stay tuned to the other Hogstide Network shows, and, keep your eyes on the dollar and cents. See you next time.
And please don't try to track me down.
I didn't even ask.